Today was Friday, our first full day on vacation in sunny Southern California, and we had just returned from a trip to Knott's Berry Farm in Orange County. I had been there once before, many years ago while stationed at the now-closed Marine Corps Air Base at El Toro. We all had a great time and, since there were still several hours of sunlight left, decided to spend some time at the pool. Before I get any further, let me tell you a little bit about us. My name is Shay McKnight. I'm 39 pushing 40, and I'm the lead software developer for an aerospace firm that specializes in avionics for both military and commercial aircraft. You might think it odd that a software developer would work in a setting like that, but you'd be amazed at how much software is used in a modern aircraft. I started there after finishing college 13 years ago. I spent 4 years in the service as an avionics technician working on fighter aircraft and was a perfect fit for the job. I met Kay shortly after I arrived in town on a blind date. Kay is 3 years younger than me and works at a fairly large medical clinic in town as a nurse. Standing at just 5 foot 6 inches, her pretty face and long blonde hair had me hooked from the start. We dated, fell in love, and got married. After a couple years, we bought a house on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We've been married now for 13 years and have 2 sons, John, now 10, and Robert, just 2 years younger. Thankfully, both of them favor their mother, and I suspect they'll be attracting the girls in fairly short order. Like his mother, John sports blonde hair, but Robert's hair is more sandy-colored, like Kay's father. Kay had a difficult time with Robert's pregnancy and convinced me to get a vasectomy after he was born. I reluctantly agreed and had it done at the clinic where she works. Kay said it could be reversed if we ever decided to have children again, so I went along with her request. As far as I could tell, things have been good for us so far. We both had good jobs we liked, a nice house, 2 cars, 2 children, and a somewhat active sex life. I thought I had it all. Sure, we had issues in our marriage, like anyone else, but we always seemed to be able to work things out. At the time this happened, I had no idea that my whole world was about to fall apart, and this would be the last weekend we ever spent together as a family. As I watched, Kay put on her new bikini. She had told me she bought it for the trip, and I loved looking at her in it. At 36, I thought she could easily pass for someone 5 or even 10 years younger than herself. I whistled as she modeled the skimpy 2-piece suit for me. Forget the pool, I told her. Why don't we stay here and warm up the bed instead? She laughed and slapped my arm. Is that all you ever think about? She asked playfully. When I think about you, it is, I told her, wrapping my arms around her. Well, we'd better get to the pool before it gets too late, she said. Go check on the boys, would you, please? Of course, I said. The hotel suite we got for the week was quite large and featured 2 bedrooms off a central room. Each bedroom had its own bathroom. It also featured a kitchenette. It was more like a small apartment than a regular hotel room. It cost a pretty penny, to be sure, but in my mind, my family was worth it. The boys slept in one room while Kay and I slept in the other. I checked on the boys and verified they were ready to go. Once I finished that, we headed to the pool. I saw Kay looking at something on her phone and wondered what she was doing. Get anything? I asked. It seemed that she was always on that thing and almost never let it out of her sight. She shook her head. No, just filling our folks in on the day, she said. Her folks lived in the Pittsburgh area and had for many years, but mine were still in my native Florida and were now retired. I thought nothing more of it, and we went to the pool. After playing in the water with the boys for a while, I got out and dried myself off. Before I could sit with my wife, however, a fairly tall, clean-shaven man approached us. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, had short dark hair, and wore a pair of cutoffs and a t-shirt with a short-sleeve shirt over that. He introduced himself to us as Dan and shook our hands. Mind if I join you for a bit? He asked, sitting in a chair next to Kay. There were plenty of open chairs by the pool, and I couldn't help but wonder why he chose to join us. Before I sat down, he reached in his pocket and pulled out a business card that said he was an account executive, read, salesman, for Acme Medical Supplies, and was based out of Columbus, Ohio, about 3 hours down the freeway from us. Isn't Acme one of the companies your clinic uses? I asked Kay. I had seen one of their vehicles at the clinic a couple times in the past. She nodded her head. Yes, they're one of several companies we use. She turned to Dan. Do you ever make it to Pittsburgh? He nodded his head. Yes, I do, about once every 2 or 3 weeks. My territory stretches from Columbus to Pittsburgh. I see. So, what brings you here? I'm here for a convention starting up this weekend. I'll probably be here for most of the week. We talked for a bit longer and learned that he actually lived with his wife and 2 girls in Zanesville, a town along Interstate 70 between Columbus and Pittsburgh. Dan described himself as a happily married man, despite living in a house full of women. He joked that apparently, he was only able to sire girls. That's funny. It seems that Shane can only produce boys. I recalled reading an article once that said it was the man who determined the sex of a child, depending on whether the sperm carries an X or a Y chromosome. He spent some time with us and even played a game of water volleyball in the pool with the boys and I. He seemed like a nice enough fellow, and I saw nothing between him and Kay that caused concern, but for some reason, my radar was active and on overdrive. Eventually, we decided it was time for dinner and got out of the water. Dan said his goodbyes, telling us he enjoyed the afternoon and hoped to see us again. We enjoyed our evening meal and finally went to the room. Imagine, Kay said after we got into our bedroom, having only girls. Maybe Dan can give me the girl I've always wanted. What? I asked myself. Where the hell did this come from? Don't even joke about something like that, remember? It was your idea to have me snipped after Robert was born, and I absolutely will not tolerate any cheating. Oh, I was only joking. I wouldn't do something like that to you. I love you too much. I love you too, but I didn't find anything funny about what you said. Nothing more was said, but for a moment I thought I saw guilt on her face. Maybe I was just reading too much into what she said. After spending time with the family in the central part of our suite, we sent the boys to bed and headed into our room. After I was ready for bed, Kay, who was still wearing her bikini, said she couldn't sleep and wondered if I would mind if she went for a late swim. I don't mind. Want me to join you? No, someone needs to stay here with the boys. I shouldn't be too long. Okay, I said. She got up and headed out the door. Since our third-floor suite overlooked the pool and jacuzzi, I grabbed my camera and placed it on its tripod. I loved taking pictures and video of my wife when she wasn't looking. She was the most beautiful woman in the world to me, and I simply enjoyed watching her. I started the camera and zoomed in after I saw her walk into the fenced-off pool area. She slipped into the water and swam around for a while, then got out. She dried herself off and sat in one of the lounge chairs along the pool. After a while, I saw movement and zeroed in. Dan had just entered the pool area, still in his shorts and t-shirt. He sat next to her and they talked for a while. I thought I saw her look up at our suite, as if she was checking to see if I was watching. I knew the windows were tinted and I was far enough back from them in the darkened room that she wouldn't have seen me. Then she bent over and seemed to give him a kiss. I zoomed in to get a closer shot, but she and Dan got up out of their chairs and walked out of the pool area together, and I wasn't able to get a clear shot. I thought that maybe Kay was on her way back up to our suite, so I turned off the camera and took it off the tripod. I laid back on the bed, processing what I just saw. Was she cheating on me with some guy we just met? I looked at the dresser and saw that she had left her phone behind. For a moment, I considered opening it up to see what she was doing, but I changed my mind. I didn't want to invade her privacy, only to learn there was nothing going on. I waited and waited, but Kay never showed up. Damn, I wondered. How long does it take to get into an elevator to the third floor? 2 hours later, she walked into our bedroom and I could tell something was different. For starters, she was sweaty and smelled different. I couldn't quite place the odor, though. About time you came back up, I saw you leave the pool area a couple hours ago. Sorry, Dan came down and we talked for a bit, then went into the restaurant and had a few drinks and chatted. I guess I lost track of the time. Damn, I thought. The witch just lied to me. I know what alcohol smells like, and she certainly didn't have any alcohol on her breath. I've been wanting you for so long, I said, taking her in my arms. As she took off her bikini bottom, I saw what looked like smears of off-white, gooey liquid on it, and there was no doubt about what it was, and no doubt that it didn't come from me. Come on, baby, she moaned. Suddenly, I had no desire to ever touch her again, and I started getting sick to my stomach. I couldn't believe she actually wanted to give me sloppy seconds. The witch. I got up and bolted for the bathroom. I closed and locked the door and barely made it to the toilet before I threw up. It seemed like I was throwing up everything I had eaten all week. Kay tapped on the door. Sweetie, are you all right? I'm sick to my stomach, I said in between dry heaves. After I finished, I washed my hands several times to make sure I got all of her lover's goo off of me. I washed my face and sat back down on the toilet. How long has this been going on? I asked myself. Why would she do this to us? It's not like I was gone all the time, and I certainly didn't let myself get out of shape. Why? Why? I asked myself over and over. It's amazing the things that go through a man's mind at a time like this. Was my whole marriage a sham? Are the boys even mine? Damn her. I'm not even sure how long I sat there contemplating all this. Eventually, she tapped on the door again. What? I yelled. Sweetie, do I need to call a doctor for you? She asked quietly. No, I'll be out in a bit, I said, making sure I was cleaned up. I sprayed some Lysol in the bathroom to cover up the smell of my vomit and walked back into the bedroom. I had no desire to look at the woman I thought I would grow old with. She tried to approach me, but I waved her off. We laid back down on the bed, and for the first time in our married life, I rolled away from her without even so much as a goodnight kiss. "I love you," she said quietly. I said nothing in return. "Good night," she finally said before turning on her side. I thought I heard her sob a few times, but I simply didn't care anymore. Finally, Saturday rolled around and I got myself up out of the bed. I didn't get much sleep the night before, and what sleep I did get was filled with nightmares of Kay and Dan having sex in the bed with me laying there, unable to move, helpless to do anything. I said nothing to Kay and did my business in the bathroom. I had promised to take the kids to Disneyland, and nothing Kay could do would make me break that promise. "How are you feeling this morning?" Kay asked as we got dressed. "I hope you're feeling better than last night." "I feel like shit right now," I growled. "Maybe you should stay here today," she said. I shook my head. "I promised to take the boys to Disneyland, and that's what I intend to do. At least I don't break my promises." She recoiled a bit from that, but said nothing. We got dressed and took the boys downstairs for breakfast, saying almost nothing to each other. Dan came to our table as we ate. He grabbed a chair and sat at the corner between Kay and I. For a moment, I thought I saw a smirk on his face as he did so. Kay looked at him, all smiles. I wanted to rip his head off. "So, what's on your agenda for the day?" he asked. "We're going to Disneyland," Kay said. "Oh, that sounds like fun. Mind if I tag along?" I couldn't believe the nerve of this a-hole. "What about your convention?" I asked, hoping I sounded neutral enough to keep the two cheaters off guard. "Oh, it's just a bunch of boring seminars today. I've heard all that stuff before." "Well, Dan, I think Shane wanted to make this a family outing," Kay said, looking at me. Good for her, I thought, even though it was a bit too late. Dan shrugged his shoulders. "That's right, Dan. I promised my family a day at Disneyland, and that's what I'm going to give them." "I understand. Family is the most important thing." "Yeah, I thought. Too bad you didn't think of that while you were screwing my wife last night." "Maybe next time," he added. "I don't think so," I thought to myself. "You guys have a good time," he said. Standing up, we stood up as well, as we had all finished our breakfast. As we left, I thought I saw him signal Kay, telling her to call him later. "What's gotten into you?" she asked me as we got on the bus for Disneyland. "You were so cold to Dan." "I could ask the same of you, dear wife," I said, emphasizing the word, wife. "Or should I be asking, who's gotten into you?" "Shane, that's not nice," she said, pouting. "Please," I said sarcastically. "Look," I added, trying to sound calm. "Let's just have a good day for the boys' sake, okay?" "Okay, Shane. I don't know what it is that's gotten you so upset lately, but whatever it is, I'm sorry, okay?" "Yeah," I said in a neutral tone of voice. Normally, I would have hugged and kissed her, and we would have put our differences behind us, but not this time. After what she tried to do to me last night, I didn't even want to touch her or look at her, and there was no way she was going to sweet-talk her way out of this. She sat back, deflated, perhaps upset that her attempt to get me to warm up to her didn't work. "I hope you're not going to be mad for the rest of our vacation," she said. I looked at her, saying nothing. We spent the day at Disneyland, and I made sure the boys had a good time. I pretty much ignored Kay for much of the trip, but tried to remain civil for the boys' sake. It wasn't easy, but I think I managed to pull it off. More than once, however, I saw her texting someone on her phone. Was she texting Dan? Who knows, I thought. It was a fairly tired family that crawled back on the bus that afternoon. I looked at Kay after we got seated. "Well, did you have a good day?" I asked. She nodded her head. "Yes, I did. It would have been better if you had actually spoken to me, though." "Sorry, I'm still not feeling that good from last night," I added. "Maybe you should try to get a good night's sleep tonight," she said. "Yeah, maybe. Right, I thought. As if a good night's sleep will take away your cheating." Which, we rode the rest of the way in silence and grabbed dinner when we got back to the hotel. When we got in the room, I decided to try one last time with Kay. I approached her and wrapped my arms around her. "I'm sorry I've been such a bear. Why don't we put the kids to bed and enjoy some private make-up time together?" "I'd love to, dear, but my period started up just a bit ago." "I'm sorry. What?" I asked myself. I'm no doctor, but I'm not stupid. I knew her last period just ended a week before we left Pittsburgh. What kind of a game is she playing? "I'm sorry too, well, I'm bushed. I think I'm going to lay down for a bit." "Why don't you do that, dear? If you don't mind, I'm going to go down to the pool for a while." "Yeah, go ahead," I said, resigned to the fact that she would probably be in Dan's bed getting screwed within the next half hour. I watched as she walked out the door, still wearing her shorts and t-shirt. I pulled out my camera and set it up to see if I could catch them together. Sure enough, they met at the pool. This time, I zoomed in to get a close-up. As I watched, they kissed, his hand on her hips, then talked for a while before leaving. These weren't the actions of people who had just met. This time I got clear pictures and video. I was certain they were heading back to his room. I sat on the bed and thought about what I should do. Part of me wanted to find his room number and go beat his butt, but I knew I'd only end up in jail. Then I saw she left her purse and phone on the dresser. I picked up her phone and saw it was locked. I knew her passphrase was either John or Robert's birthday, so I tried using the month and day of John's birthday. Bingo! I was in. I started going through her text messages, and that's when I knew what was going on. From what I could tell, the two of them had been going at it hard and heavy for the last year. As it turned out, Dan was Acme's representative for the clinic she worked for and made regular stops there every other week. During that time, they engaged in quickies whenever they could find enough time. But something changed drastically within the last couple months. Kay started talking to Dan about getting pregnant with a girl, and she thought he would be the best candidate to get her knocked up. She told him about our planned week-long vacation and actually suggested he try to make it to California so they could be together. Making matters worse, it seemed Dan's wife, Alicia, knew all about their plans. Apparently, they had some kind of an arrangement where they each took on different lovers from time to time. Over the course of the next several weeks, they plotted and schemed to make it a reality. Once Dan got his vacation approved, they set it up so that it would appear that he would just happen to meet us at the pool. Then she would find ways to spend time with him while using me as a babysitter. Their ultimate plan was to have her spend every night in his room, and judging from the more recent texts, that would start tonight. Worse yet, she agreed to deny me any sex for the whole week. "What are you going to tell your husband?" he asked in one text. "I'll tell him my period is starting," she wrote back. "He won't come anywhere near me sexually while I'm on my period. He's going to suspect something, you know," Dan wrote her. "He hasn't yet," she said. "He'll know when you get pregnant," Dan wrote. "Huh. He thinks the boys are his too," she said in response. "But they're not. I got a DNA test done about a year and a half ago to prove it. I'll email it to you." "Damn," he wrote back. "Why do you stay with him then?" "'Cause he's a good provider and he's great with kids. Better yet, I never have to worry about him getting me pregnant. After Robert was born, I talked him into getting a vasectomy." "Do you know who the real fathers are?" he asked her. "Yeah, an old boyfriend is John's father and a doctor I used to work for is Robert's. He even did Shane's vasectomy." "Damn," I thought. I remembered the doctor left the clinic a few years back and became some rich mucky-muck at a teaching hospital in town. "You're something else. You'd better hope he never finds out. Something tells me he'd kick your butt to the curb in a heartbeat. He's a big teddy bear. Trust me, he won't do anything. I'll just let him know that if he divorces me, I'll destroy him financially and keep him away from the boys." "You're cold," he said. "Yep, the coldest." "Did you give him my sloppy seconds last night like you said?" he asked in another exchange dated just this morning. "Almost, he was about to. But then he got sick. He hasn't hardly spoken to me at all this morning. Maybe he's figured it out," Dan said. "Nah, he's clueless as ever. Probably something he ate. LOL. "We still on for tonight?" he asked. "Oh yeah, I'll be at the pool like we discussed." "How long you going to stay?" Dan asked in response. "I'll have to get back to the room about 8 a.m. or so," she said. "So you've got me for the whole night." "He wants to take us to the Brea tar pits." "Boring." "Okay, see you tonight," he said. "See ya, lover," she responded. It was a good thing Kay wasn't around right then. I've read stories where people say the opposite of love is indifference, not hate. That wasn't true in my case. There was no indifference in me. It was, simply put, a blind, seething hatred. The witch lied to me all these years and even robbed me of ever having a family of my own. At that moment, I wanted to punish her, slowly, with my bare hands. I had to know about the DNA test she spoke of, so I opened her mobile email client and did a search. Sure enough, there it was in a folder marked Stuff. It was dated little more than a year and a half ago. I opened it up and saw the proof of her treachery in black and white. Somehow, she got a sample from me and the boys. The test was clear. The two boys were, at best, half-siblings with the same mother but different fathers. The test concluded that I could not possibly be the father of either child. Angry beyond words, I forwarded the document to my own email and looked through the other emails she had kept. There were a number of them, from Dan and other men dating back about 8 years, just after Robert's birth. Almost all were quite explicit and some included pictures and video, which I also forwarded to my own account. I looked through her purse, which she had placed on the dresser. I found a container of birth control pills with about half of them gone. Why would she need this considering I had a vasectomy? I asked myself. I found her planner and looked through it. Kay has a habit of writing everything down, and I noticed a number of days with DK written in red. Those were probably the days she hooked up with Dan, I thought. I also found a notation that read, "Stop BC 2 days before we left for vacation." Another notation read, "No, S, the same day." It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. No doubt, she had stopped taking her birth control and cut me off from sex. Why? I wondered. With my vasectomy, I couldn't possibly get her pregnant. Maybe she was saving herself for Dan and wanted to make certain he would get her pregnant. I took pictures of the planner and the birth control bills and put everything back. I looked at her phone, wondering what more I could get from it. Then I had an idea. Some time ago, the company I worked for thought that one of the junior developers might be passing trade secrets to a competitor, so they used an application that monitored all of the activity on his cell phone, from SMS text messages to phone calls and emails. Another app was used to record and transcribe any calls with the logs saved on the device and archived, either locally or to a different server. This was a bit dicey, thanks to federal laws regarding the recording of phone calls. As I recalled, the information could be accessed by any device with the right credentials. It turned out the rumor was unfounded. However, the developer was found to be a bit lax in his personal security habits and was given a stern lecture before being transferred to another department. I set up an account to track all the activity on Kay's mobile phone number and, within minutes, was able to access everything using my phone, tablet, or personal computer. I set up an app to also record and transcribe any calls on the phone. I knew this couldn't be used in court, but I figured all's fair in love and war. And in my view, Kay had just declared war. The third thing I did was install a phone finder app so I could keep track of where her phone was at all times. This way, I reasoned, I could keep tabs on her location, assuming she had the phone with her. I also decided to get myself and the boys away from Kay, so I looked up flight information and called the airline reservation desk. I learned there was a flight back to Pittsburgh set to take off just before midnight, so I made the arrangements. The flight would land about 4.5 hours later. However, there was also a 3-hour time difference between the two cities. That would give me time to pack, get to LAX, and get through security. By the time Kay returned, we would be back in our hometown. I made a call to my in-laws, hoping I could speak to them before they went to bed. Fortunately, Kay's parents and I got along well. They considered me the son they never had, and I thought of them as my second mom and dad. Kay's mother, Julie, answered the phone on the second ring. "Hi, Mom. Sorry for calling so late, but I have a really big favor to ask." "Sure, Shane. Everything okay out there on the West Coast?" "Not really, Mom. I'm bringing the kids back home tonight, and I was wondering if they could stay with you for the week. I'll explain when I get there." "Well, of course they can stay here. Is something going on between you and Kay? I don't want to get into it on the phone, but I promise to bring you up to speed when I get there. And whatever you do, please don't mention anything to Kay." "Okay, I promise," she said. After ended the call, I grabbed my things and threw them in the suitcases. That took all of about 5 minutes, given my anger. I went into the boys' room and shook them awake. "Come on, guys, get up, we're leaving. You need to get packed up, right now." They looked at me, scared and tired. "What's going on?" John asked. "It's an emergency, we're going home. You guys will spend the rest of the week with Grandma and Grandpa. Now, get up, move." "Where's Mom?" Robert asked. "Isn't she coming?" "No, stupid. She's with that Dan guy," John said. I looked at my 10-year-old son. Had he seen what I was missing? "How do you know that?" I asked him. "She was texting him all day today, Dad. Didn't you notice?" Frankly, my attention was on them during most of our trip to Disneyland, but I remembered seeing her on her phone. "Yeah, come on, get a move on, guys. We're leaving in a few minutes." I helped them get packed up, then wrote a note for Kay, assuming she wouldn't see it until the morning. "Kay, you weren't here when we got up this morning, so I took the kids out for the day. Maybe late. See you later, S," it said. I wondered if she would even notice that I left no term of endearment, but frankly, at that point, I didn't give a shit. I figured that if Kay stayed true to form, she would probably read the note and head on back to Dan without giving the place a second glance. We took our luggage and headed to the front desk, where I settled the account and turned in my keycard. I told the night manager that my wife was still in the room and I didn't know how long she would stay. "I hope you enjoyed your stay," the young woman said. "Yeah, thanks," I said. Walking out front, I saw a van marked Airport Shuttle and spoke to the driver, standing next to it. He situated us in the van, loaded our luggage, and we took off. It turned out that I had timed it just right. We got to the airline check-in desk and my new reservation was confirmed. It took a while to get through security, but we were finally on the aircraft and heading for Pittsburgh. The boys were sound asleep minutes after the plane took off, but I couldn't sleep. I pulled out my tablet and started doing research on Pennsylvania divorce law. Pennsylvania is a no-fault state, however. State law allows for divorces based on adultery or other reasons. Those were usually more expensive, the sites I saw stated, and could take longer to resolve. From what I could tell, it would be pretty much a given that I would have to pay child support. Part of me really didn't mind, though, since I loved the boys I had raised, even though I wasn't their biological father. Our assets would be split evenly, but it looked like I could avoid alimony given the evidence of her long-term adultery. It also looked like Kay would end up with physical custody of the boys, and I would end up being a weekend dad to children I never fathered. Chances are, she would also end up with the house, but I thought, maybe I could get her to buy out my half of the mortgage. I knew what she made and mentally figured that if she budgeted herself carefully, she could get by, although it wouldn't be easy. The bottom line was that I would need a really good lawyer to handle this, not just some paralegal filling blanks on pre-printed forms. I would ask Cliff, my father-in-law, who happened to be a corporate lawyer, if he could recommend someone. I fired up the Watcher app to see what was going on with Kay's phone. There wasn't anything new, but I saw the app had finished archiving the entire contents of her phone: text messages, pictures, videos, emails, call logs, the works. I thought about looking through it all some more, but figured I had endured enough punishment for one 24-hour period. I spent some time thinking about what I could do to get back at the two cheaters. There was no way I was going to let this all go unpunished. I remember Dan saying he and his wife lived in Zanesville, so I did a search and found an address and phone number for a Daniel and Alicia King. I figured that since she knew what they had planned, it wouldn't do any good to confront her. Exhausted, I turned off the tablet and sat back, hoping to catch a few winks of sleep before the plane landed. I awoke just as the plane began its descent into Pittsburgh. We deplaned with the rest of the passengers, collected our bags, and made our way to the car. I called Cliff and Julie to let them know we were back and on our way over. I pulled into their driveway and carried the boys' things to the door. Julie and Cliff met us, gave the boys a big hug, and ushered me inside. I set the boys' luggage down and Julie hugged me. "What's going on, son?" she asked. "I thought everything was okay between you and Kay." "I did too, but I learned it was all a lie." "What do you mean?" Cliff asked. I pulled out my tablet and showed them the DNA test document from Kay's email and her text with Dan. "Oh my God, how could she be so stupid?" "I'm sorry, Shane. I thought she outgrew all this nonsense after she married you." "What do you mean?" I asked. Kay was a bit of a wild child in her younger years. It started during high school and only got worse when she went to college. She was one of those girls you'd see on stage at spring break taking her clothes off. She was always out with one boy or another. She got engaged for a while, but they broke it off. She told us they just drifted apart. "She never told me anything about that," I said. "Yeah, that was while she was in college. What was that boy's name?" she asked, turning to Cliff. "Oh yeah, Mike, something. Mike Jacques. They went to high school together. I think I still have that picture of them going to the prom." She pulled a photo album off a shelf and opened it up, flipping through several pages. "Here it is," she said, showing me the photo. I looked at the photo of a much younger Kay and her high school prom date and noticed something right off the bat. Mike, her date, looked very much like John. I showed the photo to Julie. "Is it just me, or does he bear a striking resemblance to John?" I asked. Julie and Cliff both looked at the picture. "I think you're right. They do look an awful lot alike. Don't they, Cliff?" she asked, looking at her husband. He nodded his head. "Sure does," Cliff said. He looked at me. "Do you think he could be John's biological father?" "Looks like it to me, but it'll take a DNA test to prove it. Do you know if this guy is still in town?" "Yes, his family has owned a deli here for years. Makes the best pastrami. I think he still works there." She wrote something on a piece of paper and handed it to me. It was the name and general location of the deli. I would have to go see this guy, I thought to myself. I looked at Cliff. "Can you recommend a good divorce lawyer?" I asked. "I can. You sure that's what you want to do?" "Absolutely. Kay has lied to me the last 13 years and now she's denied me my own children. Even now, she's shacking up with some salesman in his hotel room in California." "I understand, son. Look, I'm disgusted by what she's done. You've been very good to her and I think of you as my own son. But she is my daughter and I still love her. Do what you need to do, but promise me one thing." "What's that?" I asked. "Promise me you won't physically hurt her," he said. I nodded my head. I could see his point. I promise, I said. Thanks also. We'd like it if you could come by for dinner tonight with us and the kids. I'd like for us to sit down and discuss this in detail. I'll be here. He pulled out his wallet and handed me a business card. Marion Hawkins, it read, with an address and phone number. She's the best in the business from what I hear. I worked with her a few years back. She absolutely hates cheaters. I suggest you call her office bright and early Monday. Thanks. I'll see you this evening and please, don't let Kay know we're here. Mum's the word, Julie said. We said our goodbyes and I hugged the boys, promising to be back that evening. I left and headed to the place I used to call home. It seemed so dark, so empty without Kay and the boys. Everywhere I looked made me think of happier times. Tears began to form in my eyes, knowing those happy times were gone for good, tainted by her lies and deceit. I wiped the tears away and headed upstairs to the master bedroom, vowing never to cry over Kay again. Looking at myself in the bathroom mirror, I realized that I hadn't had a decent night's sleep in nearly 2 full days. God, I said to myself, I look like shit. I brushed my teeth and crawled under the covers. I was asleep almost the second my head hit the pillow. Meanwhile, Kay was in the hotel. I walked into our hotel suite right at 8 o'clock Sunday morning, hoping to see my husband and the boys. I didn't know what to expect, not after the way Shane treated me the day before, and I was frankly a bit scared. Fortunately, I showered before I left Dan's room this morning. The last thing I needed was for Shane to smell my lover all over me. I opened the door, expecting to be hit with the noise of 3 men getting ready for the day. Or rather, 1 man and 2 precocious boys. Instead, it was deathly quiet. I wondered what was going on and went into the room Shane and I shared. He wasn't there, but I did see a note on top of the dresser. Kay, you weren't here when we got up this morning, so I took the kids out for the day. Maybe late. See you later, S, it said. Short, sweet, and to the point, just like my husband, I thought. I noticed it didn't include the usual endearments he typically left. Not even a single, love you, or anything else. Maybe he's still a bit burned up about Friday night. Oh well, I thought. I figured there was no sense in trying to call or text. Judging from his mood yesterday, it probably wouldn't do me any good. And besides, I said to myself, I really wasn't all that interested in seeing a bunch of tar, anyway. I saw my phone on the dresser, where I left it. Picking it up and unlocking it, I noticed the Messenger app was open. Strange, I thought. I always close my apps out when I'm done. Maybe not, though. I called Dan's cell number. Hey lover, I said when he answered. Bonehead took the boys early this morning, and he says they may be late getting back tonight. So I'm all yours for today and tonight if you want. He's gone already? Dan asked. Yep, guess he got tired of waiting for me to show up, so he took off. His loss. Meet you downstairs for breakfast then? Maybe go from there to the pool and back here for more fun? You got it, lover. I couldn't wait. I was still tingling from the marathon sex session we had last night. After that, there was no way Shane could ever satisfy me again, I thought. Too bad he's such a stick in the mud. We could have had a lot of fun together, the 3 of us. It's been, what, nearly 15 years since my last threesome. His loss, Dan's gain, I said to myself. I grabbed a few things out of the dresser and left. Meanwhile, Shane was at his house. The clock read 1:30 p.m. when I finally opened my eyes. I must have been more tired than I thought. I got up, rubbed the sleep out of my eyes, and headed for the bathroom. It was a good thing today was Sunday. There wasn't much I could do about an attorney today, but I did have one very important thing on my agenda. I looked at the phone and noticed Kay hadn't sent any texts, nor did she call to see where we were. Figures. I wondered if she saw the note I left and decided to spend her day with Dickwad. After I showered and dressed, I fired up my tablet and checked for activity on her phone. Sure enough, there was a new call, which meant she had to have been in the hotel room and read the note I left. According to the log, it was to another cell phone with a 740 area code. Looking it up on the internet, I learned it was one of 2 area codes for Zanesville, the town where Dan lived with his wife and 2 girls. I listened to the audio of the call and read the transcript, as provided by the app one installed, and figured she would be spending the day and the night with Dan. Looking at her tracker data, I saw the phone, and presumably her, were still at the hotel. I checked a map, got the location of the deli where Mike Schock worked, and headed out. I found the place easily enough, parked, and went inside. A man cutting meat on a counter behind the main display turned around as I walked inside. He had put on more than a couple pounds since his high school days and his blonde hair was thinning, but I knew it was him, Mike Schock. It also helped that he wore a name tag that read, Mike. What can I do for ya, buddy? He asked, smiling. Are you Mike Schock? I asked. Depends on who ya are, he said, still smiling. If you're a bill collector or from the IRS, no? I laughed. At least he has a good sense of humor, I thought. I'm not a bill collector and I don't work for the IRS, I said. His smile broadened, and he offered a hand after taking off his gloves. Then I'm your man. And who might you be? Shane McKnight. Good to meet you. Good to meet you. What can I do for you? Well, 3 things, actually. Do you know a Kay Williams? He nodded his head. I did, back in high school and college. Heard she got married. Yeah, she married me, about 13 years ago. I see, he said, the smile fading from his face. I understand you and her were engaged once, I said. He nodded his head. Yeah, that was a long time ago, though. Both of us were in college at the time. If you don't mind my asking, what happened? I asked. Well, I caught her with another man. I had hoped she would keep her promise to be faithful, but I guess she couldn't, so I broke it off with her. You took her to your high school prom, right? I asked. Yeah, a long time ago. Look, you didn't know her back then. She was pretty wild. I guess you could say she was the class bike. Pretty much rode everyone she could get her hands on. Got even wilder in college. I thought she might settle down as she got older, but I guess she didn't. You remember seeing her about 11 years ago, or thereabouts? I asked. His face turned red. Yeah, he said quietly. She came here to the deli about closing time and said she wanted to talk to me. I thought maybe she was looking to get back with me, but I saw her wedding rings and thought better of it. She told me she wanted to make up for what she did to me in college. Said she wanted me to get her pregnant. I asked her about her husband. I guess that would have been you. And she told me you got off on her having sex with other guys. Said it was a game you two played. Not exactly, I said. Figures, he said in response. Doesn't sit too well with that ring, does it? I asked, looking at the wedding ring he wore. He looked at it for a moment before answering. I wasn't married at the time. Met my wife about 6 months after that day. You ever hear back from Kay? I asked. Yeah, she came in and told me she had a boy. Named him Jim or something. John, I said. I pulled out my phone and showed him a picture of John. Remarkable resemblance, don't you think? Yeah, good-looking boy. I guess you want to take a swing at me now, right? I shook my head. It's a bit late for that, but there are some things you can do for me. What's that? He asked. Would you be willing to testify to that in court? Tell the judge what you just told me? Maybe swear out a statement? I guess I could do that. After all, it sounds like she played us both. She did. Also, would you be willing to have your DNA checked to verify that you're John's biological father? Are you planning on coming after me for support or something? He asked, nervously. I shook my head. I don't know what the court will order. My name's on the birth certificate, and I've been raising him for the last 10 years. I don't know what Kay or her lawyer will do, though. He thought for a minute before answering. All right, I'll do it. What do I have to do? I pulled out a plastic bag with a Q-tip. Just let me get some saliva from inside your cheek. I'll take it from there. He opened his mouth and I swiped the Q-tip inside his mouth. I put the Q-tip back in the bag, marked it, and put it back in my pocket. There's just one more thing, I said. What? He asked. I'd like a pound of your pastrami, please. I'll pay for that. His face broke into a huge grin. I see you're a man of good taste. You know, we make the best pastrami in the state. So I've heard, I said. He handed me a small piece to sample. It was, without question, the best pastrami I had ever tasted. That is good, I said. If you want, I'll throw in a sandwich. No extra charge, he said. Sounds good, Mike. Please do. I haven't had lunch yet. He weighed out a pound of meat, placed that in a bag and, grabbing more meat, put together a sandwich, wrapping it up in paper after he finished. I thanked him after paying for the pastrami. You seem like a real stand-up guy, Shane. I'm really sorry about everything and I hope it all works out for you. Thanks, Mike, and thank you for your honesty. See you around. See ya, he said as I walked out. I drove home, taking a few bites from the sandwich as I went. I had one more major item on my agenda for the day. I put the packaged meat in the refrigerator and finished the sandwich Mike made for me. Pulling out my tablet, I checked to see if there was any new activity on Kay's phone since this morning. There wasn't. It seemed she didn't even care to know if the boys and I were all right. I decided to go through her emails and text some more to see what else I could find. I started at the beginning of her emails and found several exchanges between her and Dr. Winstead, the doctor who performed my vasectomy. He made it clear to her that he did not want to know anything about the child he had sired and asked if she had approached me about having a vasectomy as he suggested. Yes, I did, she told him in her reply, and he's open to it. I told him I had a hard time with Robert, which I did, and he'll do anything to make me feel better. Good, he responded. I'll take care of it myself. Trust me, he'll never be able to have children when I'm done. Just curious, why don't you want to have kids with your husband? Seriously? Have you looked at him? You think I want to have children with him? No way. I couldn't believe what I was reading. My so-called loving wife and this doctor conspired to render me sterile, all the while making me believe I was doing it for her. And the thought that she really didn't want children with me cut me to the core. Why did she even marry me if she felt that way? I looked through more of her emails and brought up some of the pictures and video, showing her having sex with other men. I copied all this to a thumb drive as I would use it in my divorce. I kept going through her emails and found that she had trysts with at least 5 other men after good old Dr. Winstead left the clinic. Judging from the dates on the emails, it appeared that a lot of her affairs took place while I was gone. Granted, I didn't travel much for my work, but there were a few times I had to travel to either supervise software updates on old avionics gear or observe test flights with the new gear we developed. At most, I only had to travel maybe 3 or 4 times a year. Then she met Dan and things changed, radically. It seemed that Dan and his wife were into the swinging scene and wanted to get Kay and I involved as well. Kay told them I would never go along with it, so they decided to keep the affair between the 3 of them. I sat back, wondering how could I not have seen it before? Was I really so blinded by my love for her that I simply overlooked it? How much longer would this treachery have gone on if I hadn't found out? Worse yet, how would I explain this to the boys? I always told them that honesty was always the best, even if it hurt. I knew that someday I would have to let them know. Damn her, I thought. Damn her to hell. I looked at my watch and realized I would have to leave soon to have dinner with the boys and my in-laws. I took another shower, feeling dirty after looking at Kay's emails and texts. Once there, I rang the doorbell and Cliff answered. He invited me in and the boys were all over me. God, I love those boys. Too bad I wasn't their biological father. We all sat down and had a nice meal, then retired to the family room. Dad, John said, getting my attention. Are you and Mom getting divorced? I nodded my head. I'm afraid so, son. I told him. Is it something I did? He asked, tears in his eyes. I held him close to me. I'll be better, I promise. No, son. It's nothing you did. You two are the best sons a man could ever want. Then why? Don't you love Mom anymore? It's hard to explain, son. Sometimes, moms and dads go through things that can't be fixed. This is one of those times. But remember that I love you and always will, and I'll always be there for you, okay? I spent some time hugging both boys and reassuring them, but they knew things would never be the same in our family again. Listen, why don't you guys go on back upstairs and get ready for bed? I need to talk with Grandma and Grandpa for a while, okay? Okay, they said as they left the room. I waited until they were gone and pulled out my tablet. I spent the next hour filling Cliff and Julie in on what I knew so far. I showed them all of the text messages and emails, and even showed them the pictures and video. They were clearly disgusted with the way their daughter had been acting, but watched the videos anyway. It seems she's been doing this to me our whole marriage. I told them. That explains what happened last summer, Julie said. What do you mean? I asked. Last summer, when you were at Edwards for a week, Kay brought the boys over and asked if they could stay the night. Told me she was going to a birthday party for a girl at her office and thought she might be late. We didn't see her until Sunday afternoon. I remembered that trip. I had to supervise a test of some new software and ended up being gone a whole week. I looked through my tablet and found emails from that time between Kay, Dan, and Alicia. It appeared she had spent the weekend with them, engaging in a 2-day-long sex fest. I showed the emails to Cliff and Julie. I'm so sorry, son, Cliff finally said. You deserve a lot better than this. You've been a wonderful husband and father. Thanks, Dad. I'm sorry to hit you guys up with all this, but as you can see, there's no way I can stay with Kay. I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of calling Marion. She told me that if you could be at her office at 7:30 in the morning, she'll see you right away. Thanks, I'll be there. Make sure you take all of this along with your financials. If anyone can get you through this in one piece, it's her. Just don't do anything stupid. I won't, I promise, I said. What are you going to do about the biodads? He asked. I shook my head. I don't know. I met Mike earlier today. He seems like a nice enough guy, and he was honest enough to tell me the whole story. I think he got played just like I did. I don't know what I'm going to do about Dr. Winstead, though. Yeah, I've met him at the country club a few times, Cliff said. He's a cocky son of a witch. I'd love to see you take him down a notch or two. I laughed at that. I'd like that, too. I looked at my watch and realized I still had a lot to do before I went to bed. I'd better get going, I told them. If you don't mind, I'd like to tell the boys good night. Good idea. Julie said. I left the room and went upstairs. The boys were in bed, but not asleep yet. I hugged them and told them I loved them and promised I would see them soon. I bid Cliff and Julie good night and headed home, where I commenced to pull up all of our financial information. I printed off everything there was and put it in a folder, along with the most damning emails. I also copied the photos and videos to a thumb drive. I checked one last time to see if there was any activity on her cell, and seeing none, I decided to call it a night. I couldn't believe that she wouldn't even bother to text me to see if the boys were all right. The next day, Monday, I got up early, noticed that Kay still had not bothered to text or call, showered, shaved and dressed, and left to see Marion. I met her at the door to her office right at 7:30. "Mr. McKnight, I presume," she said as she opened the door to her office. "Please call me Shane. You must be Ms. Hawkins." "Actually, it's Mrs. Hawkins, but you can call me Marion. I see you got your father-in-law's message." "I did. And he tells me you're the best in your business." "I am. My receptionist won't be in for another half hour. So why don't I get us a cup of coffee and we can get started?" "Sounds good to me," I said. She made us each a cup of coffee from a Keurig device in the reception area and escorted me into her office. "Mr. Williams, your father-in-law, tells me you're looking to get a divorce. Is that right?" she asked. "Yes, it is." "Okay, tell me what's going on." I brought her up to date on the whole sordid affair, leaving nothing out. I showed her the emails, the text messages, the DNA form, and handed her the flash drive with pictures and video. "And you say you've heard nothing from her since you left California Saturday night?" she asked. "Nothing, not a text message, phone call, nothing." "Well, that won't look too good in the eyes of the court. You say you've identified the biological fathers of both boys." "I have," I said, telling her about my encounter with Mike. "I see. Well, you should know that divorce isn't about justice, I'm sorry to say. It's usually about money. In most cases, the mother almost always gets custody and the father always pays child support along with spousal support. All of your assets are normally split in half, and the custodial parent typically ends up with the house. Pennsylvania is a no-fault state. However, the law does allow for divorce on the grounds of adultery. I'm assuming that's what you're looking for." "It is," I said. "We'll have to prove that to a judge, and from what you've shown me, I think we have a slam-dunk case," she said. "Based on that, we can ask that no spousal support be granted. However, you'll still have to pay some child support. That's based entirely on a formula taking in a number of factors." "Even though I'm not the biological father?" I asked. "You've been raising the children as yours for a decade, but that doesn't mean we can't do anything. You say the father of the youngest is Dr. Robert Winstead?" "Yes," I said. Suddenly it hit me. My youngest boy is named Robert. The witch named him after his real father. "You say he's the one who performed your vasectomy after encouraging your wife to have you get one," Marion said. "Yes, is that important?" "It could be," she said thoughtfully. "Let me work with that a bit. In the meantime, I'll put together a petition that gives her physical custody of the boys with you having shared custody. Chances are, that's what the courts will order anyway. I'll also ask for the basic minimum on child support and no spousal support. I'll also give her the option to buy out your half of the house. There's also the possibility the court may order you to undergo counseling. Is that something you would be interested in?" "No. She's lied to me from the beginning and robbed me of ever being able to have a family. There's nothing that will ever make me reconcile with her." "I understand, however, depending on the judge, you may be ordered to go through counseling anyway. I'm just letting you know it's a possibility." I nodded my head in understanding. "What about DNA testing?" I asked. "We already have the test results your wife got, but I can see where additional testing to prove paternity could come in handy." "Sure, go ahead with that if you want." We talked for a while longer, with her giving me a list of things to help protect myself financially. After taking all her notes, she stopped and looked at me. "When would you like her served?" she asked. "As soon as possible," I said. "You say she has the hotel suite in California booked through Friday?" she asked. "Yes, but she could come back anytime. As far as I know, she still doesn't know that I've left." "I see. Okay, we'll plan to serve her when she gets to the airport. If you hear that she's coming back early, call me on my cell. If I don't answer, it'll be because I'm in court, so just leave a message. In the meantime, don't do anything stupid. Let me take care of this. I know this is hard on you, but you need to be strong for your two boys. Thanks. Is there anything else we need to discuss?" "Not right now, but please get in touch with me if you hear from her." "I will. So, how much do I owe you?" I blanched after she told me, but I knew it was necessary. I wrote out the check and handed it to her. We said our goodbyes and I headed out the door, feeling somewhat better about the situation. I still hated Kay, but at least I was doing something about it. On the way home, I stopped at the bank and made the changes to our account that Marion advised. I took out half of everything and opened a new account in my name only, then paid off and closed the joint credit cards. I ordered one just for myself, however. I also knew that Kay had her own card, in her own name, which wasn't tied to the joint account, even though I paid for it out of our joint checking account. By the time I got home, it was nearly 11 a.m., 8 a.m. California time, and I figured that if Kay was going to call, she would do it soon. Meanwhile, Kay was still at the hotel. It was right at 8 a.m. Monday morning when I entered our hotel suite. Even though I had taken a shower in Dan's room, I could only hope that Shane wouldn't put his hand under my shorts. He would instantly know what I had been doing. I paused before entering the room, not knowing what I would find. I didn't hear from him at all yesterday and was a bit concerned about the boys. I knew they were safe with Shane, but it would have been nice to hear something. I put the card key in the slot and opened the door when I heard the latch release. The place seemed eerily quiet when I entered, almost too quiet. Where were they? I didn't see them in the restaurant. Had they left for the day already? I called out, but no one answered. I walked into the boys' room and saw both beds were made up. I didn't see the usual clutter of toys or clothes and wondered what was going on. When I opened the closet, I got the shock of my life. All their clothes were gone. I opened their dresser drawers and everything was gone as well. Panicked, I ran into our room and opened the closet door. All of Shane's things were gone as well. I looked at the dresser and saw the note he left Saturday night hadn't moved. Opening his dresser drawers, I saw everything was gone. Oh my God, I thought. He knows. I pulled out my cell and called. Hello, Shane said when he answered. Sweetie, it's me. Where are you? Are the boys all right? What's going on? As if you really give a shit, he said. I could hear the anger in his voice. Of course I care. I love you and I miss you. Ha, he exclaimed. Is that why you waited 36 hours to contact me? What? Too busy screwing Dan to notice that the boys and I were gone. What are you talking about? I knew the boys would be safe with you, and I know how much you hate using your cell, I said. Bullshit. You figured I'd be gone, so you decided to spend the day and the night with your sex buddy. Don't lie to me again. Which? I know everything. What do you mean, everything? I asked. I was getting just a bit nervous by now. How much does he really know? I mean, everything. I found your DNA test results and I know the boys are mine. I know who their real fathers are and I know how you plotted to keep from ever having my children. You've lied to me our whole marriage. Even this vacation was just an excuse to screw Dan for the whole week. Shane, it's not what you think, I said, trying to throw him off balance. It didn't work. Don't give me that. You know good. Cheating 304. You deliberately plotted and schemed to deny me a family. You've been screwing around on me our whole marriage. Well, guess what? It ends now. We're finished. We're through. I've already seen an attorney about a divorce. Divorce? No, please, Shane. I don't want a divorce. I don't give a shit what you want anymore, he said. Shane, please, let me come home and we can talk this out like adults. I understand you're angry right now, but we can work this out. There's nothing to work out. The room is paid through Friday, so you might as well stay there. You'll be served papers when you get back. By the way, you should know that I've canceled your joint credit card and your debit card. You still have your own personal card, though. Shane, please, I began, but he had already ended the call. I stood there looking at the phone, debating whether I should call back. I figured it wouldn't do any good, so I decided not to call. The more I thought about what he had said, though, the angrier I became. Yeah, I cheated on Shane over the years a lot. I had always been a bit wild, and I thought once I was married things would change. I stayed faithful to Shane for the first 2 years of our marriage, but the old desires started coming back. I missed the quick hookups and the occasional threesome and the thrill of illicit sex with multiple partners. About that time, we discussed starting a family and I made a unilateral decision that changed everything, at least for me. I decided to let Mike, my former fiancé, get me pregnant. I justified it to Mike by telling him I owed it to him. Yeah, I lied a bit when he asked me about my husband, but the truth is I never really wanted Shane's children. It's not that he's ugly or anything. He's no Quasimodo, but he's certainly no Brad Pitt, if you know what I mean. It wasn't easy for me at first, and I did everything I could to keep Shane from finding out. I usually waited until he was gone on one of his trips to have my trysts, so I would have time to enjoy myself and clean up afterward. It was hard, since he was only gone a few times a year. After John was born, I took on a few more lovers, always being careful to keep Shane from finding out. I started using some of the comp time I had built up to spend afternoons with various men. Some of my lovers took pictures and video, sending them to me as keepsakes. A couple years after Mike, I started an affair with Dr. Winstead, one of my superiors at work. He refused to wear a condom, and I ended up pregnant with Robert. Yeah, I named the boy after his real father, even though he didn't want anything to do with his offspring. I took a chance that Shane wouldn't find out, and until now, my secret was safe. Dr. Winstead told me I should have Shane get a vasectomy after Robert was born. It was a wicked idea, I thought, so I suggested it to my clueless husband. He bought my lies and agreed to have the vasectomy, and I made sure Dr. Winstead did the procedure. After Robert was born, I hooked up with several men, again, making sure to be as discreet as possible. I never denied Shane anything, and I promised myself I wouldn't disrespect him by giving him sloppy seconds. As long as he stayed in the dark, I thought everything would be fine. Somewhere along the way, I met Mac. That's not his real name, of course, but it's what everyone calls him. We hooked up a few times before he made a proposition that promised to be very lucrative. Everything we did was all cash, and so far, I had managed to build up quite a nice nest egg. I decided to use it as my fallback if Shane ever decided to dump me. Yeah, some of what I did for Mac stretched the legal limit, but he assured me everything would be fine if I played it cool. About the same time I met Mac, I decided to verify that neither of the boys were fathered by Shane, so I had a DNA test done. I was happy with the result and decided to keep the document for future use. I knew that a time would come when I would have to tell my husband the truth. I knew he would be devastated, but I really didn't care. After all, what could he do? Put the kids back in my womb? I know there are some who would consider me evil for denying Shane children, but I figured it was my right to decide who the sperm donors of my offspring would be. As far as I was concerned, Shane's reaction to what he had learned was way over the top. We had gotten through a lot over the years, and I saw no reason why this should be any different. In my mind, I had thought it might be fun to have Shane share in my sexual exploits, perhaps as the willing cuck who would enjoy watching me having sex. In my wildest dreams, I never thought he would actually go through with a divorce, though. He always ended up giving in to me in the past. Until Friday night, I had never seen him get angry or truly upset about much of anything. But the more I thought about him calling me a 304, the angrier I became. Yeah, I'm a 1, but I asked myself, how dare he call me 1? I'll show him, I thought to myself. He thinks I'm a 304. I'll show him just how much of it I can be. A plan began to form in my mind. What the hell, I thought. Then I had another thought. Shane said he knew everything, and that really concerned me. If he really knew everything as he said, I could end up in jail. I pulled up my contact list and made another call. McGregor, a man's voice said. Mac, it's me, Kay. Hey, Kay, how's California? Getting a good tan? Yeah, it's fun. We have a problem. Shane knows. He said he knows everything. Shit, Mac said. Meanwhile, Shane was at his home. I had just ended Kay's call, having decided that I couldn't take any more of her cliches and bullshit. I waited a few minutes and checked to verify that the app one had installed on her phone Saturday night had uploaded the audio file along with the call transcript.